Okay.
Hi, Trisha. Lee, I can hear that dog.
Oh no. I'll stay on mute as much as possible.
That's all right.
We should have some music playing. Really good idea.
Some banjo.
There we go. Great.
That's a nice touch.
How about some Blue Violet Waltz, Brad?
Oh, right. I know that's your favorite.
It is my favorite.
I probably forgot how to play it by now, but yeah.
Ah, it's so
No, I love it.
sweet.
Thank you. Thank
It
you.
is
Yes.
so sweet. In fact, I'm going to incorporate that into my presentation.
Lovely. Cool. And so this is accessible to folks after the session, right? That's the idea of recording. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do have a question about that. I'm saving it to my computer, but then do I then need to, where does it go then? Are you saving it to your computer or are you saving it to the IBMA account, the Zoom account? It asked me to save it to the computer or save to cloud. So I just saved it to the computer. I have a lot of hard drive.
We'll fix that. We'll upload it. I'll be talking to you about that when we're all done. We can retrieve all of the recordings.
Okay, okay.
But after the whole series is done.
Gotcha. Okay.
I just got a message that my battery's running low, but it's plugged into a charger. I'm going to go see what I can do about that. I'll be right back. I need to find another charger.
Okay.
Can't believe that.
Well, good luck.
Oh,
And we'll wait a few more minutes as more people gather as well.
well, my computer's plugged in, but hold on. I might have to rejoin by phone.
So is this a broadcaster lesson? Always have a backup plan for connecting?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I guess Barb is up there in the northern Adirondacks. It's harder to find stable internet, so who
I don't think
knows?
it's an internet problem. I think it's a battery problem on her computer.
Right, right.
But,
Otherwise, she'd be home doing it at her office. I think she's out at the library or something.
right. Give her a minute. Well, I think if it's all right with you, Brad, I'm going to go ahead and do some introductory remarks, and we can start with you with we will keep the faith that Barb will log back in on either on the computer or on her phone. Sound all right?
You happy to wait a minute? Oh, here she comes.
There she is. Let's admit her. All right. Okay. Give us just a couple minutes, folks. Tricia, you comment that you've got a barking dog at your feet. I'm sitting in a neighborhood of barking Mexican dogs, which I can't really control, so we'll probably hear some of that at some point. Let's see. Okay.
There.
There she is.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm on my phone this
That's all right.
time because, um, well, because my computer died.
Wow. Well, you had a backup plan, so that's great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to the third in our series of virtual workshops. These are brought to you by IBMA's Leadership Bluegrass Alumni Committee. I'm Lee Stivers, and I'm the co-chair of the Leadership Bluegrass Alumni Committee. Just want to mention that we have two more. We've had two already of this in this series, and we have two more virtual workshops planned. These are scheduled for the second Wednesday of the month. So in April, there'll be a panel presenting a tool that's available for, or will be available for, bringing bluegrass into public schools. And that's something that the current Leadership Bluegrass class, which is actually happening right this minute, is working on. And so we'll hear about that in April. And then in May, the second Wednesday of the month, we'll have one on how to make money as a songwriter in a streaming world. All of these workshops are being recorded, and they'll be available for viewing after the last one is finished. Today, we're very happy to have two veterans of bluegrass broadcasting, as well as Leadership Bluegrass alumni, Brad Kolodner, who's the host of Folk Alley and host of Bluegrass Country Radio, and an artist as well, and as he mentioned, running a festival starting tomorrow, so quite busy. And also Barb Heller from North Country Public Radio is coming to us from way up north in New York State. And they're going to talk to us about how you choose what you play as a broadcaster. Before I turn it over to them, I just want to mention that there's not too many of us here, but let's just keep our questions and comments on in the chat for now. If we want to open it up for mics later, maybe we can, but we'll just do that. Okay, take it away, Brad and Barb.
Well, thank you. Brad, do you want to start off and give a little?
Sure thing. Thanks for
little
having
bit
us,
of intro?
Lee, and the Leadership Bluegrass team. I was a member of the class of 2016, best class ever, of course, and excited to be here. Lee was a classmate as well in that one, and excited to be part of this here today. Frankly, this topic, how we choose what we play, is perhaps my most favorite part of being a broadcaster. Choosing what I play and being the friend that's sharing music with their other friends is really what it's all about. I love being a broadcaster because I'm able to share music that I enjoy, that I think deserves to be heard, deserves to be disseminated and listened, but also music that I just am excited to have other people listen to and then sharing that experience with others. So I'm looking forward to getting into the weeds of how we pick what we play, the process, how the album goes from the recording studio to the airwaves, and how we as broadcasters sift through the many entries we receive. And I think, Barb, we should also get into some best practices as well, and maybe some ideas for how to sculpt our playlists in a way that's not just great for us as broadcasters playing music we enjoy, but also how do we format our hours? How do we think about themes? How do we think about balancing different components with regards to gender inclusivity? All those things as well are relevant. So maybe I'll just jump into how I've maybe the background of my show and exactly how that impacts what I'm playing, because I think the format of the show makes a big difference. So just a little bit of background here, and I'll toss it over to you, Barb. So I host, as Lee said, 2 weekly shows on Bluegrass Country Radio. Actually on the air now from 12 to 3 Eastern every Wednesday and Friday. I host a progressive bluegrass show and an old time music show, and they're both 3 hours long. And on bluegrasscountry.org. Folkalley.com. It's all online streaming radio service, and it's a mix of folk, bluegrass, old time, Celtic, Americana. It's a big mix of anything under the folk umbrella, and I'm on 5 hours a day every weeknight from 7 to midnight, and weekends from 9 to 2 Eastern. And both of those shows are programmed pretty differently, and we'll talk about how the different formats impact what we choose to play. But that's sort of the rundown of my background. I'm on right now, like I said, so the magic of radio working for me today with a pre-recorded show. So maybe, Barb, you want to talk a little bit about your programs and what your formats are?
Sure. First of all, I'll apologize. My laptop computer died just minutes before we started this, so I'm coming to you via my phone, and which limits me. I can't see the gallery, and I can't tell who else is in the room. So I can't see your questions. So I'm going to rely on our moderator to, help me out there and coach me through who else is in the room with me. So hi everybody. I am Barb Heller, and I'm coming to you in Canton, New York. It's right on the border to Canada. It's so close that our nearest big city is Ottawa, Ontario. And then to the south, about 150 miles, is Syracuse, New York. So we still have snow here, and it's in the 20s today. And there are lots of ways that I make programming decisions for my weekly bluegrass show called String Fever. All of them are listener based, and that's what I keep in mind at the fore always. I call it my show, but it's really about my listeners. My audience comes first, no matter what I choose to play. So I try to help level the playing field with pieces that I choose, often by choosing a topic. And that, as I like to say, it statistically normalizes my choices, and it helps to remove some bias in how I choose songs to play or tunes. I might choose a single topic. Sometimes it's based on a holiday like Valentine's Day or Easter or President's Day. Sometimes I'll choose just a single word like snow. Obviously, I live in an area that gets a lot of it, or weather, or the full moon on a week like this, or maybe spring because it's just around the corner here, or school. It depends. But that, again, as I say, it statistically normalizes a lot of my choices. And I like to think it removes some of the bias from just choosing songs that I've loved as they come out and putting them more into a specific category where they're going to get airplay for a good reason, putting some relevance to a song. Sometimes I'll choose by instrument, but I I think you really have to be careful here, because when you put your listener first, my listeners don't want to hear 2 hours of just banjo music. You know, they're better rounded than that. They want some
You
variety.
need to find some new listeners, Barb.
Yeah. Well, well, and even, you know, when you choose by performer, have a good reason to do it. I like to justify it every time I make a choice. Well, why am I playing 4 songs by the same artist in 30 minutes? Well, did she just win a Grammy? Is this a band that has a local show coming up? Like, why do you have an extended interview with this performer? In other words, there are lots of categories to slip songs into. So organizing by topic helps me to play tracks that I might not otherwise choose. The other goals that I keep in mind when I am choosing is audience participation, because I broadcast for public radio. If my audience doesn't support my show, I won't have a job. You know, we're listener supported. So I try to come up with topics that will engage my audience, and I make sure they know how to contact me. I give out my email on the show, my show now is in real time through the COVID pandemic. It was pre-recorded, but I still made sure that I let listeners know how to reach me whenever they had a question or a request or a comment. And I often read their comments back on the air, just to let them know that, you know, I got your email, and so did everybody else who's listening. So audience participation rates very, very high on my list of choices for airplay. So I'm not sure, since I can't see the gallery, how many of you are radio hosts or podcast hosts, or people who you know, would be in the business of choosing a playlist. But I'll often look and think ahead and think, we haven't done a play along show in a while. Sometimes I'll do an entire hour of songs with 4 chords and say, play along. You know, every song in this hour has 4 chords. You can figure it out. Whatever you're playing on, just play along or sing along. Or at our station, we do an entire week of cover songs. Every music host plays cover songs for a week. And my listeners love it. They tell me, they email me, they love cover week. And the other thing that I always encourage in the audience participation realm is jamming. Just play along with the radio, just like old school. Just play along. You know, don't be shy. You're sitting there in the sugar shack, just waiting for your sap to boil. Just grab an instrument and play along, or dancing. And at the end of the year, I usually ask listeners what they want to hear more of in the coming year. And last year, more than ever, listeners said, we want more dancing. And so I was really happy to read that from my listeners. And so I program a dance set into almost every hour of Bluegrass programming. In fact, Brad, you released a beautiful little waltz called Blue Violet Waltz. It's one of my favorites because it's perfect for slow dancing. And I program it in frequently because it's such a sweet little song to dance to. So those are the basics on how I choose my playlist. I don't pay quite as much attention to just playing new releases, though I make sure I let people know, listeners know, if something is new. Sometimes I'll devote a short set to here's what's brand new this week. But I don't think my listeners really just want to hear what's new. They just want to enjoy what they hear. And if they're going to hear a string of songs, it's important to me to let them know why I chose that set of 5 or 4 songs. Why? Well, it's all about circles. Everything's circular. Sometimes if you can't make up your mind, then play a song about indecision, or 3 or 4 of them, and let your audience get in your groove. So those are some of the choices that I make. And I almost always make a playlist up ahead of my show. I know what's coming next. because it's too hard to find songs that all deal with the topic of school or a full moon on the fly. So I do make up a playlist ahead of time, including a dance set. And I look ahead to see who's playing in our region, might be traveling through, that I can talk about or play on my show. So that's mine in a nutshell. I'll say this: your listener comes first, and you're only talking to one person. When you're on the radio, it's just me and you, and we're the only ones here. I'm playing this song for you, and here's why. And that's my approach to hosting and choosing music. Brad?
Well, on my end, I think I have pretty similar approaches with regards to asking the listener to be engaged and participate. I don't know if I got this from you, but I also tell my listeners to play along if they can, or sing or dance or sit back and enjoy the tunes, whoever they want to participate. And I think the point about speaking to the singular, the individual, is really important. I've certainly was in the habit of saying, thanks to everybody for listening. Thanks you guys, you folks. But I think it's actually more helpful and more focused to really just focus on the individual. And when that's in the back of my mind as I'm talking and picking the songs, choosing what to play, I think it helps me feel like I'm, like I was saying earlier, sharing some of my favorite songs with a friend. And that always helps me. I'm going to get into some of the details, though, of how I actually put together the playlist and how I literally choose what to play. So, like you said, Barb, I program my show before. It's always in advance. My shows are pre-recorded. So it's a little insight behind the curtain there. I'm not live anymore. Well, shouldn't reveal too much, but much of what I do is pre-recorded. And with that in mind, I still try to capture the live energy. So when I go into recording my talk sets, I am very much, you know, trying to put myself in the shoes of being on stage or on air live. I have this little on air sign behind me that's kind of corny, but it's anything that kind of helps me get into the mood of being live. I think helps increase my focus and ability to just stay on track. But with regards to the playlist, my show is 3 hours long. And in that 3 hour time block, this is for the Brad Kalodner show, the one that's on every Wednesday afternoon. It's a progressive bluegrass old time Americana show focusing mostly on new releases, so music released within the last 5 years. Which, if you're an artist or if you're out there on the scene now releasing new music, it's a relevant program because I'm always combing through the charts, various lists, and I get plenty of emails every day with new releases, and I pretty much download everything. I put it all onto my computer, drop it into my iTunes, and it's organized by release date, when it's been added to my library. And so when it comes time for me to build my playlist for the show, I usually build my playlist the morning of or the day before the show. I like to keep it really fresh. If I program too far in advance, I kind of lose track of the little mini themes and storylines that I've incorporated into the show. So the first track on my show typically is an up-tempo tune. Maybe it has typically would have words, something that really is going to catch a listener. And because my show is more on the progressive bluegrass and Americana side, I tend to play something that's pretty much right down the middle of the sort of progressive bluegrass kind of vein. Instead of starting with like an old time tune or Americana song or something, really trying to just stay on topic for that first track. Something that really is going to catch people. I often play a brand new release as the first track. So I have something right off the bat to talk about that is fresh and exciting and new. And then my sets are all 3-song sets. So what I think about within each of those sets is some kind of storyline, some way to tie those together. So for example, let's say I start off the show with a brand new track from Molly Tuttle, and then my next track, I often will play a new release, and I will tell everybody, coming up this hour, new music from X artist, X artist. So it kind of keeps the listener hooked. But I very much focus on mini storylines. So it's fun for me to think about how to tie together different songs. So maybe it's 3 artists with ties to Kentucky, or 3 songs about, I don't know, like some favorite music festival of theirs. Maybe it's a song about Telluride, and then a song about Grass Valley, and then I don't know, little things like that can help me keep different themes running throughout the hour. Instead of having one whole theme like a Valentine's Day theme or St. Patrick's Day or something, I can have like a mini themes depending on when somebody tunes in. There's always some kind of storyline in there. But with regards to the mix of music that I play, I try to focus on releases within the last 5 years. So I'll sprinkle in maybe 3 or 4 brand new releases every hour, maybe a couple older tunes. Try to balance it out. I never play the same artist twice in the course of my show, so I try to keep that variety. I also make sure that I'm not having too many instrumentals in an hour. I'm an instrumentalist. I love playing instrumental tunes, but like you were saying, Barb, earlier, don't want to just play banjo tunes the whole time or just fiddle tunes. So I'll often play, like a song with vocals and then a song that's instrumental and then a song with vocals or something like that in a 3-song set. And I also think about tempos too. I'm very focused on making sure that over the course of a 10-minute period or a 15-minute period, it's not all kind of slow, very mellow vibe tunes. I want to have stuff that's pretty mixed. So I'll have, an up-tempo tune and then maybe a waltz or something mellow and then back to an up-tempo tune. But I also don't want to have it so jarring from one song to the next. So I think about how one song blends into the next and making sure that it doesn't have like a real jagged transition. That's probably enough for now with regards to my approach to actually crafting the playlist. Yeah, Barb, how do you handle the one thing that I've always wondered? How do you handle the deluge of new music that comes in every day? How many emails do you get? How many records do you receive, and how do you sift through it all?
I start by organizing my email, and I have a file for new releases. And so I don't deal with it every day. I set aside one day a week to deal with it. And because I often will get several notices about the same release, and I forget, if I deal with it every single day, oh, didn't I see that a week ago? Or I don't know, I'll click through. So I get the mail once a week, new releases that come in the mail, and I shelve all the other emails into a once a week file. So I deal with it all at one time as a boatload, and that kind of helps me plan for my next show. And I put in a few new releases, a short set of new releases. But when things come in, I try to give a good look at everything, and I appreciate the one sheets. If you're an artist looking for airplay, sometimes the one sheet doesn't give me useful information. I used to be a huge fan of it, but now I find that the one sheets that come in sometimes give me, I don't know, stuff I can't use as a radio host. Anyway, I'm interested in knowing more about a performer, like what part of the country are they from, kind of what makes them tick, how many songs did they write on the album, things like that. So when I
Hey,
get
Barb, can I
new,
jump in here and just
sure,
say something about the one sheets? I find that one sheets often are trying to tell a almost too elaborate story for the purposes of a broadcaster. So if I receive a
yes,
one sheet and it's 3 paragraphs of just kind of their story or their background, it's actually while it is very interesting, I think from a literary perspective, and maybe if you're writing a review of an album or if you're writing a story about the artist, but for a broadcaster, I think actually the best one sheets tend to have like a 1 or 2 sentence description of each song, and
liner
maybe
notes,
a
yeah,
very brief background of who they are, like you were saying, where they're
yeah.
from, how they met, how they formed, something simple.
Mm-hmm.
But I think actually having a couple sentences about each song is more helpful to a broadcaster. And I'm just picking up
Yes.
this one I got from the Foreign Landers, a duo from South Carolina, David Benedict and Tabitha Agnew Benedict. And I love their one sheet because every track is listed out with just a sentence, about their song. And why it's important to them, why they wrote it, and that's it, And so for me, when I'm on the air getting ready to announce their song, I just have their one sheet right here above my desk, along with a whole bunch of the latest release CDs that I have, so I can access them quickly. And I'll just grab the one sheet and read I'll as I'm broadcasting on the air, I'll pick up the one sheet and find the song, and then and that was Sunny Side of the Mountain, a Jimmy Martin bluegrass standard, a thoughtful reimagination
Yes.
of their take on that. Just something. Of course, like I know Sunny Side of the Mountain. It's just nice to have like a reminder and a quick reference on the one sheets. So I'll toss it back to you there, Barb.
On a similar topic, I often think that as broadcasters, we do provide a bit of liner notes that listeners can't see. So I love liner notes, and I wish I still played all physical CDs again, just so I could read through all those liner notes and share some with listeners. But yeah, I like to see that artists, if you're looking for airplay, I do love the one sheet that gives me very brief liner notes that I can use on the air too. If it's a great one sheet, I'll even keep it with the CD in my music library, just because it has so much useful information. So, but on the other hand, I got to say, on the flip side, um, when I'm announcing new music, there is a limit to how much I want to talk about new things, and how much I want to just leave it up to my listeners. It's enough sometimes, I think, for them to just know that it's new. Maybe a few credentials about the performers if it's relevant. Um, but my listeners tell me if they love something or if they don't like it. And I think it comes down to knowing a little more, as much as you can, about your audience. And if you encourage participation with your audience, they'll help shape your playlist. They'll email you or call you, however you like to keep in touch with them. And they'll let you know what they really want to hear. And they'll let you know what they want more of or what they never want to hear again. I occasionally get, I hate to admit this, scathing emails from listeners who are highly offended by certain words that are in songs that never had offended me or I hadn't even noticed when I played. But this is part of being in the business that we're in. Not everybody loves everything that you play. And I have to say there should be limits for for what gets on the air and what doesn't. But sometimes things that I don't think of as controversial hit my listeners as very controversial, very, very offensive. And in the latest instance, um, it was the word heathen. It was very, very offensive to one of my listeners, so much so that this listener wrote to my program director, my station manager, and me, which got immediate results. That's all I'm going to say. So be sensitive and respond. If your listeners don't like something that you played for whatever reason, don't just ignore it and say, "Oh, that how could you be offended at that?" Well, they wouldn't take time to get in touch with you unless that was a real concern, and you should deal with it seriously, no matter what it is. Be good to your listeners. Remember, you might only have one or two, but they're really important, both of them. Brad?
Yeah, I certainly had my fair share of scathing emails about songs or reasons why I'm the worst broadcaster on bluegrass country radio
It
or whatever.
happens.
But what can you do? I don't think
Yeah.
every one of those warrants a response. I think if the tone is we don't need to go down this path. This is not related to how we choose or
Right. Criticism is part of our job,
it is part of the job, and
accepting
that's
it.
fine. I
Hmm.
think as long as we're confident in what we're choosing and we know the overwhelming response is positive, there will be the
Yeah.
occasional detractors, but that's all right. I don't let it bother me too much. And I think I guess another thing to get into here that we haven't touched on yet is how to sort of balance out different components of who we're playing on the show. I try to make sure that my playlists are balanced pretty evenly gender wise. So I'm making sure that I don't have, six songs in a row, male vocalists, but really trying to mix it up within each little mini set that I have. And not just because it's, I think the right thing to do, I think it just sounds better too, to have variety within who's singing, who's playing. So I'm thinking about that in the back of my mind. So much so at this point that after doing this for 10 years, it just becomes muscle memory. It's not something that I'm really thinking about too hard while I'm programming. It's just become part of the way I program, and I will do that moving forward. I think it's great to also, as great to do, because I think it also shows listeners what bluegrass is and what it can be, and not just what it was. Making sure that we're thinking about how us as broadcasters represents to the listener what is bluegrass, what is old time, what is Americana, what is roots music. I think we have a big responsibility to sort of steer and at least point folks in the direction of where we think bluegrass is going. And I think a lot of listeners don't, this may be their only contact with bluegrass music. They may only listen to one of our shows as their weekly dose of bluegrass intake. Maybe they listen to Spotify or they go to concerts or whatever. But I think a lot of folks who listen, this is their contact point with bluegrass music and the latest releases, and what we think of as bluegrass is what ultimately in turn they may think of as bluegrass music. So I think it's important and a big responsibility that broadcasters have with regards to representation and other components of just showing what this music is. Is that something you think about, or how do you approach that as sort of the one who's holding the hand of the listener as you're guiding them through this bluegrass journey?
I like to think that I'm right across the table from my listener, or they're driving and I'm in the passenger seat putting the CDs in the player. But I had a program director who used to, she's retired now, but every year she made a point of sitting me down for a conversation, and she would ask, where do you see your show going in the coming year? You know, what do you want to do? And this was especially important during a time when traditional bluegrass music was undergoing a lot of changes. You heard a lot of instruments that you never heard in traditional bluegrass music, like electric bass and drums and electrified instruments. And my program director said, you know, where do you think your show will go with all of this? And my response was, I'm going to go where these performers go. I want to keep going where they go, which obviously is a poor fit if you host an old time bluegrass music show. But there you follow certain musical rules. But in my programming situation, I'm very flexible, so that I don't even have to play just traditional bluegrass music. I can really play whatever I want, and there's plenty of time for extended interviews. I mean, it's public radio, so I have lots and lots of latitude. But I find again that knowing my audience is important here. You know, what do you think they would like? And sometimes I really push the envelope a little bit. And earlier, Brad, you mentioned I don't want to jar my listeners' ears too much. You know, try to kind of keep things moving. Don't play all slow music or all fast music. And I find that once in a while, a good shock is really refreshing to just play something that, although it might not be jarring, it might be very, very surprising. I enjoy it. I like it. I think my listeners like a surprise now and then too. And when I do have guests on my show, I try to pre-record interviews sometimes. But one of my favorite things to do with guests is to ask them to intro their own music. Even if I'm just recording their interview, I'll say, you know, pick a few songs and just, I don't know what questions to ask you. Just tell my listeners what you want them to know about a song. And that seems to work out very well. So I don't know how many of you incorporate interviews into your program, or if you do them live, but since I'm only on my phone, I can't see the gallery of who's participating. Again, I'll apologize. I don't really know who's in the room, but pay attention to your audience. I can't say that enough. Know who's listening. And I know if you broadcast over a huge area, you never know exactly who's listening. But I know that in upstate rural New York State, I have a lot of people who work from home, who listen from their shop, from their office. That for some people, I'm wallpaper. I have a lot of long mileage commuters. So I have a lot of people who listen in their car. So even when I say, go ahead and play along, sometimes I say, well, unless you're driving, and then maybe sing along instead. Encourage listeners to tell you what they want to hear. Or if you play something that you really think pushes the envelope, Ask what they thought. Let me know what you thought of that. If you want to hear more of it, here's how to reach me. You can email me at blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Let me, if I can, just jump in here 1 second and mention that we are a fairly small group, and I know there are at least several other broadcasters in the group. So in just a minute, we're going to open up the mics so that I think there's a small enough group that we can deal with mics. But go ahead and continue. But folks, if you have a question or comment or something, we can go ahead and do that, I guess, in a few minutes. We've got about 20 minutes left in the program.
So with regards to your point earlier that we've come back to a couple of times here about jarring the listener, Barb, and I will definitely go out on a limb on a song or two here and there during the hour. Big wall of sound with electric guitars and drums, and maybe it's a familiar name in the bluegrass world, but they're going for a different sound. I think it's always fun to sprinkle those in, but if I do something that kind of goes out on a limb like that, I often on the next song will kind of steer it back towards the general theme of the show, a progressive bluegrass standard or some kind of sonic texture that just fits right down the middle. So
yeah,
I never go too long out on a tangent. Even if I play on my bluegrass show, if I play an old time tune, I'll come back to a bluegrass song on the next one, and I'll kind of keep that center moving a little side to side, but kind of down the middle, and making sure that over the course of a 3-hour program that it does have a nice balance, and it's still mostly focused on my theme of progressive bluegrass Americana old time, venturing in other directions from time to time, and then also making sure that I don't play too much of the same type of thing in a row. So I won't play 5 new releases in a row, or I won't play 5 older songs in a row, and making sure that in any given period of time there's kind of like a nice snapshot of the theme of the whole show, and that really is fun for me as I'm programming. It kind of keeps it fresh as I'm presenting the material, and I also try not to, like you were saying earlier, trying to get stuck too much on one artist or one song, at least verbally. I kind of keep my talk sets in between about a minute or 2 minutes, which is long for some formats. Sometimes it's less, closer to 30 seconds, but over the course of an hour, I don't want to be talking more than 6 to 8 minutes tops, maybe 6 minutes in an hour. So that allows for about 50, 52, 53 minutes of music every hour, which equates to about 14, 15 songs, which is really, that seems to be the sweet spot for me. In an hour. But of course, the format of your show dictates a lot of that. And I know folks record in 20-minute segments and 30-minute segments, 58-minute segments. It's so variable depending on your show and your format. But yeah, if there are any questions out there, happy to talk a little bit more about anything you're interested in, as we've got some time left here. And I guess, how do you balance, Barb, your personal taste with what you think should be played on the air? Because I think I have kind of a different approach than you, in that I do listen to I certainly appreciate emails and ask for emails and calls and messages from my listeners, and I'm certainly excited to hear from them when they reach out. But I think I probably lean into what I enjoy listening to as much as anything. It's a little different with my program because it is literally called the Brad Kolodner Show. So I think folks are expecting it to be music that I like, that I enjoy, that I'm listening to on my own. And often I'll play songs, I'll choose songs to play that week that I heard at a jam earlier in the week, or that I heard at a concert over the weekend, and I'll share those stories too. This was a tune played at our local old time jam last week, or this is a song I heard from Watch House over the weekend at their concert in DC, or whatever it is. So I'm kind of taking them into my musical head as well. But how do you approach balancing your personal taste with what goes out on the air?
I think what you just said is very, very, very important. And I think that's at the root of how many of us decide what to play. If you take one step back and look at all the listening choices that people have now that you can stream almost anything you want, they have to have a compelling reason to tune in to your show or my show. And it has to be more than just the music. They can hear this music anywhere. Well, in a lot of different places now, and a lot more places than they ever could when I started broadcasting. So I like to think that my audience tunes in for the music and the discussion. And I think it's nice to hear that, well, I heard, fill in the blank band play last weekend. And like you said, they played this song and it made me realize how long it's been since I've heard this old chestnut. Let's hear it again or sing along with this. A reason to play something is what it all comes down to when you're making a playlist. And if you can share the reason with your listeners, it makes it more meaningful to them too. So why are you about to play it? Or I think I'm a proponent of telling my audience in advance why I'm playing the songs in the next set. I might say, sometimes it's just hard to make a decision. And I've been struggling with a decision all week. And so it's settled into my playlist. And we're going to listen to songs about indecision for the next 10 or 15 minutes. And I hope you have your mind. That's very typical for me to introduce a set of songs that are all about a similar topic. And that's how I keep from playing only my favorite songs over and over again, is when I have some kind of a short theme that I can settle in on for the next 3 songs or 4 songs. So once in a great while, for a full hour of my show, it'll be, last week it was stormy weather. I wonder why, considering where I live, but it was an entire hour of stormy weather and all kinds of emotional storms. There are physical storms, storms on the ocean, that tune. And so there was plenty to play on the topic of stormy weather in all of its different forms, even a dance set about stormy weather.
So we have a question in the chat. Let me read it out. It's for both. It says, both of you have had a lot of professional training in broadcasting. Do you have any resources, conferences, online resources, continuing education, etc., for those who haven't had the training you have had?
Yeah, I
Yes.
studied broadcasting in college. I went to Ithaca College and studied documentary and radio broadcasting, television news, all that. And I will say, though, the most beneficial piece of all of that was hosting a folk show on the internet, on the student radio station there, and having just in person on live on the air crash and burn experiences were probably more helpful than anything in the early days. But if you are already a broadcaster and you have a show, I mean, I've probably learned the most by doing air checks of myself and with another broadcaster, with a program director, or with honestly just going back on my own and listening to my shows. I record every show, and I will go back and listen and just put myself in the shoes of a listener and think, how is this coming out over the air? Am I talking too long on one topic? Am I speaking too quickly? Am I speaking too slowly? Just and trying to get other ears on it. That seems to be the most helpful thing for me. I don't have any specific books or online resources that I've used, but I'd be curious to know, Barb, if you have some ideas there.
My 2 favorite resources are NPR has resources for NPR announcers, and I think they're accessible from the public. If you just look into, NPR and search around, if you're a pretty good internet searcher, you'll find their radio best practices exercises. They have exercises there for breathing, warm-ups. I'm not really sure if they have exercises on actually what to say once you're on the air, but preparing your voice and preparing your breath to go on the air is all available at the npr.org website. My favorite speaker about radio best practices is Marilyn Pittman, who spoke at last year's IBMA conference. And her classes are not generally available online. I'm not sure if we still have her webinar up from last year as IBMA's World of Bluegrass, but she's a wonderful person to keep an eye out for, Marilyn Pittman, who does a 1 hour radio best practices that is so jam-packed with information, it would make your head spin. But I also have like a 10-point radio best practices that I have in front of me right now. You can email me anytime and I'm happy to send it to you, barb@ncpr.org. And it's just the basic things like bring your show to life, paint some pictures. Your job is, you are a translator between um, bringing pictures to life, really. So tell your stories, be yourself, don't try to be somebody you're not when you're hosting your show. But as far as resources, those are my three. You can email me, barb@ncpr.org, and I'll send you my list of radio best practices. Marilyn Pittman, you can find a class by her, and npr.org.
Hey, another thing I was thinking about, Barb, with regards to choosing what to play and repeating songs over the course of a period of time. How long do you go between playing a song again on your show? A few weeks, a couple months, a couple hours? How do you balance out songs that you really like or you think really should get out there? Because I know for myself, I don't typically don't play the same song more than once in a few week period. Now, of course, my show is only 3 hours once a week. So if people are there appointment listening every Wednesday at noon, they will notice if I play the same songs. But if it's a stream that's over the course of 24 hours, 7 days a week, mixing in, the same song a few times, I think is much more appropriate. But how do you think about the long term with regards to playing the same songs or the same artists?
I do not repeat a song 1 week to the next. Sometimes I'll play it 2 weeks later if there's a compelling reason to. A, I really, really love the song, or B, this is an artist coming to my area that I really want to promote, or this song just won an award, or this is a nominee for an IBMA award, or this is a local band and this track is like the only good one on the whole CD. I'm sorry, I take that back, but
Would you say that?
that happens to every DJ. It's like, oh, okay, I promised you some airplay, but there's only one track here that's really, viable. And in that case, I would repeat it rather than, do a band a disservice by playing something that I feel really doesn't belong on the air. But yeah, so I generally do not play a song again for 2 weeks.
So Michelle asked a great question here. Do you listen to everything you receive? And I think the answer is probably no. And I hate to say it, but I think if I can tell that the format of the music is not appropriate for my shows, I just am not likely to have the time to listen to it. If it's within the genre range of my program, yes, I do preview every album. I don't listen to the whole album often, but I will at least give a couple songs a listen if it is a progressive bluegrass, Americana, or old time record. And as much as I'm into it, if it's like a gospel record, or if it's a country album, or indie folk or something, and it's not something that fits the format of my show, I may listen to it personally if I like that if I like that music, but it's unlikely that I'm going to be listening to it for the purposes of playing it on the air. So I get probably about 10 to 15 emails a day with new album requests, and maybe another physical copy, not as often anymore, maybe one or two, maybe a few a week. It used to be many more, but it's now mostly digital. And so I do listen to it. Like I said, if it is within the format of my program, I will give it a listen, even if I have no idea who the artist is. And I don't know, I have no frame of reference for where it's coming from. It's just an email that pops up from someone I don't recognize. I will give it a listen. If they say bluegrass, or even if it ends up not being bluegrass, or if it says, old time and it's maybe not old time, I still will give it a listen. And if I like it, I'll actually download the files, put them onto my phone or some kind of way, or on my computer, so that I can then listen to it while I'm driving, or have it on in the background while I'm working or something. So I do have new music playing pretty continuously. I'm always I always have a steady rotation of a dozen new albums kind of in my mix here that I'm listening to, so that I can kind of hone in on my favorite tracks. But no, I unfortunately do not listen to everything I receive. If I received only music that seemed to be fit for the format of my show, then yeah, I listen to all that. But otherwise, it's hard to keep up.
Oh, go ahead, Barb.
I too don't listen to everything, but I do, if it's not appropriate for my show, I'll pass it on to another music host that I think it would be a good fit for. But I do listen to each track. Usually I call it the needle drop, that 10 seconds, 20 seconds on each track. And if I'm programming my show, I'll go through a full album and listen a little bit to each track, and I'll decide which tracks to place where in the show this week. Like, oh, that's a pretty good fit for a dance set, I'm going to put it in there right now. But if lyrics intrigue me, I'm very likely to look for the lyric sheet and to listen all the way through to each of the verses. I'm really a sucker for great songwriting. So I tend to be a very intense listener, but I don't listen all the way through to a lot of the material I receive.
Yeah, I think I do the same. Just quick previews, and then go from there. It is nice on those one sheets if it does say it's instrumental, or if it has
Yes.
different kind of textures. Those are helpful, actually. Mellow
Mhm.
or up tempo, or that kind of stuff is really helpful when we're scanning through a full record of
Yes.
14 tracks, and how do we know which one is the right fit? Because there may be some gems in there. There might be something that fits in this show but doesn't fit in that show. So anyway.
And some tracks do have strange noises at the beginning or at the end that I want to know about ahead of time. Like if you're going to put in that sound of an old time 78 LP, the tickety tickety tick. I don't want that particularly in my show. And I'm the type of DJ who will edit that out, and I won't include it, because I find that certain sounds are, I don't know, non-musical to me. And so I want to know about things like that before I play it on the air. So I do always check for stuff like that.
So another question that came in through the chat is, what tips and techniques do you have for interviewing artists?
Oh, where do we start?
That could be a whole nother hour discussion.
Well, then maybe it's the last question, because we're at 5 of, and I know several of us have to flee at noon, on the hour.
Oh, can I start with this, Brad?
Go ahead, yeah.
So before I interview any artist, I always have a very short chat that goes something like this. Brad, I am thrilled that you're going to be talking to my listeners, but I want you to remember a couple things. First, there's only one listener. It's just you and one person. Second, this isn't a conversation between you and I. This is a conversation between you and that listener. Imagine that you've just sat down for coffee with this listener, and they don't know anything about you, and they really want to know about you before they even want to know about your music. I always tell my interviewees, if they like you, they will love your music. It really, that's the way it goes with my audience, who I think I understand pretty well after 35 years. If they like you, tell us about you. Tell me about your pets. What kind of books do you like? Do you have a family? Where do you live? How do you get around? Do you drive a van? Do you fly most places? How many guitars do you have? I mean, tell us everything about you, and then get around to talking about your music. And that's my approach to interviewing almost everyone. And I try to keep out of the conversation as much as possible. So that's my MO. How about you, Brad?
That's great. I don't have much to add. That's beautifully said. I would do the same, making sure that they are aware that they're talking to the listener, and they may not know anything about their music, who they are. They may not know much about the genre that they play. And I think one thing artists will often do is they'll make reference to a song or an artist or some kind of bluegrass related thing that I think a general audience member wouldn't know about. So I think making sure that as a host, you're contextualizing what an artist may say if they forget to put it in context, or you ask the artist in advance to keep that in mind, that they are speaking to a listener that could be an expert in this music, that could be brand new to this music. It depends on who the listeners are, of course, on your show. But for me, I know it's a pretty general audience. That's a big range. But now you said that was wonderful. I will borrow your spiel there. That was great.
I will even stop an interviewee because I pre-record most interviews. I'll stop and say, "Oh, wait a minute, let's start over." Because why do artists always want to say, "Hi, everybody"? And I remind them that we do not listen to the radio in groups anymore. That was 75 years ago. Now we listen to the radio alone in the car, in our earbuds, while we're walking the dog. It's just you and my listener. And so you don't have to say everybody, just say, "Hi, I'm Brad Kolodner." And that's good enough.
As we tie a bow on this, Barb, I just want to say one more thing about how we choose what we play. And it gets back to what I said at the very beginning, that choosing what we play on the air is really the art of broadcasting. It is my favorite part of doing this. Yes, it's fun to be on the air, to talk, and to have this on-air sign and, you know, be a broadcaster and all that. But it's, I think, mostly putting together my playlist and sharing songs that I listen to, that I enjoy, that I think deserve to be out there. That staying true to that allows me to be passionate about the songs that I'm playing. I often play music that I would listen to on my own. I know that's not always the best practice, but I just find that if I'm really passionate about the music that I'm playing, I think listeners can hear that, and they'll go along on that journey with me if I really sell it to them and explain why I love this song, or why I love that banjo solo, or why I loved those lyrics, or how that song connected with me. I think it's more likely to connect with the listener, and it is fun. I think you and I are both very fortunate here as broadcasters that have shows that are pretty open format with regards to, here's a couple hours, fill it with whatever you want. You know, we're really lucky. Not every broadcaster has that luxury. And I think it's really nice that we're in positions where we can just have a blank slate. It's a little bit more work sometimes, but I think that work is really fun. And it's an important piece of, like I said earlier, portraying what bluegrass is and what it can be to an audience.
We are ambassadors for our music. Make sure that we bring it to life, be real about it, and enjoy ourselves doing it. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thank you both, Brad and Barb, for being ambassadors for our music and for sharing your experience and expertise with us today. We're going to wrap things up. Just a reminder to everyone that our next virtual workshop will be on April 12th, same time, and that will be on the topic of bringing bluegrass into the schools. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day, and thanks to everyone for showing up today. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi,
Thanks,
Glenn.
Lee. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for
Bye-bye.
tuning in.
Yeah, thanks.